Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Authors on Mission podcast, the podcast dedicated to bringing you cutting-edge insights and strategies from established experts who have mastered their fields and are willing to share their secrets to success. I'm your host, Danielle Hutchinson, Chief Creative Officer here at Authors on Mission, and today I am thrilled to welcome Lisa Johnson, co-author of the powerful book, Been There, Got Out, Toxic Relationships, High Conflict Divorce, and How to Stay Sane Under Insane Circumstances. Lisa's gone from a high school English teacher to high conflict divorce strategist, and it's as inspiring as it is instructive. She's gone through her own experiences with this as well, but she transformed those into a mission to help others facing similar circumstances. Today, we're going to explore the wisdom Lisa has gained through personal and professional experience, discovering strategies for identifying toxic relationships. So, whether you're currently in your own difficult relationship, supporting someone who is, or interested in understanding these dynamics better, Lisa's insights are going to give us some valuable tips. And of course, in the writing regards too. Without further ado, Lisa, welcome to the Authors on Mission podcast.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And I was just chatting with you a little bit about how, I feel like more people than not these days are going through situations very similar to what you're writing about. And it's unfortunate, but that just brings, more power into what you're writing. I'm working with other clients who've gone through very similar things. So, it's hard to do, but very inspiring that you've gotten into this field.
Oh, thanks. It was definitely not something I dreamed of being as a child.
I guess you don't usually say like, I'm going to be an astronaut, I'm going to be a princess, I'm going to write about this topic. So
Right.
I get it. But, it's great that you are doing it. And I know you kind of had an interesting path to get here. So I was wondering if we can kind of start a little bit, on that topic, how you went from being a high school English teacher to a best-selling author. Tell us a little bit more about all this.
Yeah, so my training was in education. I taught high school English. I taught overseas English as a foreign language in Hungary. I taught English to Japanese people at an institute in New York City, taught Spanish, and I love teaching, and I always loved writing. And I taught creative writing also, I should say. And then when I had my first child, I left teaching thinking I would take a year off, do some writing, and then go back to it. But then I started a whole other career, a bigger writing career than I imagined. And in the meantime, I was with my ex-husband for 20 years and just thought that was really steady and stable. And my original writing was about like pregnancy and health. I wrote about modeling because my son was a baby model. I wrote for Playgirl magazine, all kinds of things. And then, fast forward a number of years, I was in the midst of my own divorce and wasn't writing about it for public consumption, but was writing in my journals, which I had done, I think I told you, Danielle, since I was 12, trying to make sense of what was happening around me. And so 10 years in the legal system, 7 of which I represented myself. And I always say I got my own best education in the trenches. And then my partner and I started Been There, Got Out. We became high conflict divorce strategists. And I feel like everything led to this. My training in education, all of the writing, all of the experience in the legal system, being an English teacher and understanding how to communicate very effectively. It all brought me to Been There, Got Out. And now Chris and I help men and women all over the world, especially in terms of using effective writing and speaking skills to do as well as they can in and out of family court.
Well, it clearly has been quite the path for you in that case, going from, even different countries. And you were living in Hungary, for example. Wow,
Yeah,
yeah,
that
it's really cool then. You're living in an entirely different country. So it's clear that you're used to just huge dynamic changes throughout your life. And, I can see how that's kind of built that resilience because, when the more complicated things came up in your life, you perhaps were, better ready to deal with them in a way. I mean, at least, I'm not completely sure, but I do know it's hard, of course, to take all of that and to put it into the book as well. So I'm wondering, did you experience any challenges in taking those personal experiences of your own and putting them into the written word?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of putting things into words, that was never really challenging for me because like I said, I started journaling when I was really little. I think I had thought it was 12, but it was earlier because I think it really started with someone giving me one of those beautiful blank journals as a child and opening and being like, oh, there's all these great blank pages. What am I going to fill them with? And one of the first things was when I had a tooth pulled. I think I was in 6th grade and I had laughing gas for the first time. And I wanted to memorialize the weird feelings. It sounds bizarre. I felt like I was floating on an eyelash in darkness and I was writing about that. And that was the beginning of my journaling experience of describing what it felt like to get my tooth pulled. And so I always found that journaling was really helpful, especially during times of stress, for me to get out what I was feeling on paper. It almost felt like, it still feels like now, when something is in my head, I can't sleep, I can't think about anything else. But as soon as I write it down, and I do physical handwriting still, I don't do as much on the computer, but it makes me feel better. It's almost like when you feel sick and you throw up and it's out and then you feel much better afterwards. It's that same feeling for me when I write, when I'm stressed.
Yeah, I'm sure that a lot of authors listening today can relate to that as well. You have a tough day, you need to write about it. You get inspired by, going to the dentist, like you need to write about it, right? You want to memorialize that and you never know what that might come to be. So I guess that's a tip everybody could take home with them today is, just write when the inspiration strikes. And one day it'll end up becoming a text like this and helping just so many people. So Lisa, you mentioned you started writing this in the journals. And how did you go from, all this in the journals to collaborating with your co-author and, pulling all of that out there, getting it into an organized fashion? That must have been quite the process.
Okay, so I'm going to back up from the book that we are talking about with collaboration, but that was actually my second book. My first book was called Rite of Passage, Tales of Backpacking Around Europe, and that came directly from my travel journals. When I was 21, I spent a summer backpacking around Europe by myself. That was before I moved to Hungary a year later, and that was right after communism had left. It was during the Bosnian War, and so much was in flux and so much was changing. And I was 23 years old. It was just like a really incredible experience, the traveling. And so I kept those journals for years. And then when I was pregnant with my daughter, who's my second child, I started going through those journals again because they were such an amazing, pivotal point of my life that I thought, maybe I can do something with this. Like maybe I can put a book together. And I started pitching it to a couple of agents. And at the time, there was nothing that really focused on travel literature. It was more about like a place, like Traveler's Tales, Barcelona or something, where you'd write about a region, or it was like a guidebook for a certain area. But this was different. This was about the experience of traveling and how it makes you grow as a human being. And so the book ended up, long story short, I decided not to use an agent. I pitched it myself. Lonely Planet picked it up. I made a nice chunk of change. The book was translated to Dutch and the first printing of 10,000 sold out in 2 weeks. So that was my first book. Now, 20 years later was the second book, and that's the Been There, Got Out Toxic Relationships book and How to Stay Sane Under Insane Circumstances. So at the time I thought, I had a really successful first book. It's going to be really easy doing the second one. But the world changed, especially the world of publishing in those 20 years. And so when I started talking to some agents, they said, you have to establish yourself as an expert. You can't just like give it to a publisher, and divorce and travel are totally different. And so Chris and I, my partner, we had started like putting together a writing proposal, like a book proposal, and we had done all the research. We knew that it would sell, but we got a little bit disheartened at first because I thought, I could just sell it to, give it to a publisher and it'll be ready to go. But I had to pause it because I had to build up a social media presence to make us the experts in what we do. And so that took a couple of years, and then it started growing. And then I was doing an interview with someone who, she was called Single Mama Side Hustle. And she had written a book about what it was like after getting divorced to start her own business. And her publisher was watching the interview. It was a live interview on Instagram. And the publisher got in touch and said, have you ever thought of doing a book about this topic, about your thing, which is, as high conflict divorce strategist, and we specialize in something called legal abuse. So I said, well, we did start, but it's kind of on hold, but I'll give you an hour. Convince me that it's worth doing this second book now. And she's a total New Yorker like me. She's like this tiny little woman with this huge personality. And of course, she convinced me that it was really important to do this book. And so Chris and I had been through our own experiences. We had started building the social media presence. And I thought, at that time, we had really niched down what we were doing to focus on, like I just mentioned, something called legal abuse, rather than just toxic relationships or difficult divorces. And legal abuse is the experience of all of our clients, and me in particular, where somebody's ex is using the legal system to control, harass, intimidate, coerce, or impoverish them. So basically using court to wear them down and bleed them dry financially. And so Chris and I, with our lovely publisher, Patrice, started mapping out what we wanted to say with a focus on helping people. So it was more of like a how-to book rather than my first book. And so Chris is an excellent writer. That was one thing that attracted me to him. He's not like an official writer like me. He didn't do articles and things, but he just has really strong voice in all of his writing. And he and I are kind of similar. Our voices are a little bit different, but it's similar style. And so we kind of split up the chapters and we each did our own thing. And then we got together and edited them together. And it worked out. I mean, he always remembers it as being a little bit more difficult than I do. But I think it's because that was my background. And I used to work in publishing for a little while too. Mm-hmm. So I'm used to like the heavy editing. I like to slash stuff a lot. He likes to preserve his precious words. That was a little tricky. And actually, as of tomorrow, our third book draft is due to the publisher on a different topic, which is about how to handle when your ex is turning the kids against you. So we're in the midst of like finalizing that and trying to work together too. So we have a lot of experience trying to work together and do a book. And it's a little bit hard because I tend to be faster and, I go slashing through and he's just like more deliberate and slow. And it's tricky because we're also a couple in real life, but it's really fun. I love having creative projects with my partner. It's very, very satisfying especially when you're finished, or even just the progress of going chapter by chapter and feeling like this sounds really, really good.
Well, that is certainly an entire experience that I think a lot of authors are curious about. For example, working with somebody else, especially somebody that you're, in a relationship with, in theory, living with too. Like, you go from the editing stage to, dinner, for example. It'd be interesting to kind of transition out of that. I'm sure that was an interesting balance, working on the book versus, just everyday life. That's a whole nother trajectory. But that being said, really cool that the podcast in general is what brought you to the second book. You're just talking about your topic, building your presence, and then just so happens the publisher was watching. I guess that's everybody's dream when they pop on a podcast to, find the light at the end of the tunnel, I suppose. Mm-hmm. So it's all great that worked out for you. I think it's important that we kind of go into the content of the book too, though. This is, again, a topic that many people are struggling with, should be learning from. I guess one thing in particular, when I was looking through the book, your book does mention you developed a holistic team of complementary professionals during divorce. So I'm wondering, what is this team meant to entail? How do you acquire this team? Who's on this team? How does this play a part?
Yeah, so keep in mind that Chris and I only deal with extremely difficult divorces, separations, custody battles, and we say co-parenting hell. So a lot of people who have what's called normal divorce don't require so much help. Like the fantasy is that you do it with your spouse or ex outside of court and pay a few $100s and the paperwork's done and you kind of move on with your lives. That is not the case in our situation. So the people that we work with are all dealing with extreme forms of domestic violence. They're really kind of emotionally and sometimes physically battered. They have given up a sense of agency. They're having a really hard time making decisions, like more than normal divorce, which is hard enough. And so we always say that to get you through something like this, you need to be as stable as possible. So we like to think of you as the surface of a table. And so there's certain legs that you need to provide that stability. So first thing is friends and family. Hopefully you have not been completely isolated from your support system. A lot of our clients have, unfortunately. And friends and family love you, but sometimes they don't really understand exactly all of what's going on because our situations defy logic. So I might inadvertently say things that make you feel worse, like, well, why'd you stay so long? Or why doesn't your ex just do what's best for the kids? Or why doesn't the judge just do, whatever it is to provide justice? And so that can get really frustrating when you're dealing with not just your own emotions, but the emotions of people who care for you. But you should have them on their team because, they care for you. The second person is an attorney. So especially during the divorce process, which we always say is the foundation of your case, you need to have a professional whose job is to translate your case into the law. The problem is with a lot of our clients is they're so needy and they're so desperate, and their lawyer is the one who knows the whole story. So like I made this mistake too. My lawyer became my best friend for a year because he knew everything and I felt like he really understood and could support me. So a lawyer's job is they're not trained in supporting you. Most of them are not mental health professionals and they're very, very expensive. So you need them, but you need another leg of your table on your team, and that's a good therapist or domestic violence advocate, somebody who really understands where you are emotionally and can work on you healing. So therapists can be really great, of course, but they don't really understand the way that family court works. And unfortunately, some therapists have caused havoc for our clients by giving them legal advice like, oh, just don't communicate, just gray rock or ignore your ex, which has really bitten them in terms of custody situations where they've crossed state lines with a child on the advice of a therapist. And we recently had a client whose therapist told them after a year and a half of finally coming to an agreement with divorce, she told their child, oh, if you don't want to go visit your dad, you don't have to, when they have a court order. And she's like, oh yeah, just don't do it. And then the police will be called and then you go back to court. And I'm thinking, that is insane. Like, you don't say that to a child and then tell our client that she's not protecting her child because the child is forced to still go to visitation with both parents. So therapists can be great, but everybody needs to kind of stay in their lane. And so then the last, putting aside like real estate professionals and financial professionals, the other leg is someone like Chris and I, who are high conflict divorce strategists. And we always say we kind of bridge the gap between what attorneys are not trained to do and therapists don't quite understand. So attorneys are trained in logic, and they often assume that you're going to both come to the table and do what's fair and do what's best for your kids, when people like our clients' exes don't really care about those values. They care about what's best for themselves. So things have to be really negotiated differently. And like I said earlier, a lot of therapists don't understand how family court works. And like I said, I spent 10 years in the legal system. I spent 7 representing myself through about 100 court appearances. So I have a very strong understanding of the court system, not just my own case, which was published as case law for the state, which is a huge honor for an attorney, and it's unheard of for a self-represented litigant. But through our work with attorneys and other professionals, like, we've gained so much knowledge about how things actually are and are supposed to be in the court system. And a lot of that is in our book as well. It's not just like my personal experience. It's really gleaned from many, many professionals who work daily in the system.
I guess this really just shines a light on the power of having others in your ballpark. It's, first off, the story about the therapist kind of just blew my mind away. It's crazy to think that, unfortunately, as much as you want to give somebody advice, you sometimes have to stay within those constraints. That therapist might not have been wrong to get the advice, but, you have to follow those agreements. So I can see how it's so tricky to get around all of this. So it's hard to do, but when you have those people guiding you and kind of giving you insights from all different directions, then you're able to find the right path. And of course, when you have a book like yours, it further lights the way, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I hope so.
So, yeah, I mean, that being said, I'm wondering what other types of advice and tips can readers expect to get out of the book? For example, one thing that I saw is you talked a lot about the legal system, for example, how it was created more for professionals rather than the people who actually need it. There must be lots of advice that you offer or specific reforms that you point out that people should be aware of.
Yeah. So one of the things that we really focus on is something called taking strategic oversight of your case. And if you're one of ours, which is the 10% of the super crazy ones, you need to understand that yours is very different from normal divorce and you need to approach it from that different angle. And so the lawyer who wrote the foreword to our book, his name is David Morneau, and he's Canadian. And he really thought of it, and we've done a couple of collaborations on this idea of a client as a consumer. And he says that a lot of times people spend all this time researching what's the best refrigerator or appliance to buy. And then when they get divorced, they just go hire a lawyer without much thought. And so it's really, really important to spend that time and energy researching the professionals that you're going to work with, because this is your life. I mean, this is your future, your children. It's really, really significant. And so you need to make sure that you demand high quality from all of the professionals that you're working with. And there's certain expectations you should have. So for example, we have a section in our book about how to choose the right attorney, because that is like the backbone of everything, your lawyer. And one of the questions that we suggest asking, that's my favorite, is something like, how would you handle a case like mine? So there's all kinds of stuff out there about narcissism these days, and lawyers have started marketing how they handle divorcing a narcissist, but a lot of lawyers actually don't have experience with working with clients whose exes have addictions, active addictions, and or personality disorders. And so when you ask a lawyer a question during a consult, like, how would you handle a case like mine? It's twofold in that it shows that the lawyer has actually paid attention to you when you've talked about what's happening with your case. And it also gives you the opportunity to see if they know a strategy in dealing with this kind of separation versus normal divorce. And so I love questions that really, that are open-ended and that can cover a couple of different things at once.
Yeah, and that's a clever one too, because by saying a case like mine, it'd be interesting to see if they do pick up on the narcissist, like you just said, or whatever the exact problem might be. And it really is just like a double question, like you said, a perfect route if it's who you should be working with or not. And I think that's a good tip we should all embody, regardless of whatever the question might be, whether it be for your lawyer or somebody else on that team that you mentioned. It's something we could all apply. So I guess we should kind of transition a little bit more now into the writing process itself. For example, you talked a lot about working with Chris and how you co-authored that. But one thing you mentioned is the research. We haven't quite touched upon too much of that. So how did you go beyond your personal experience into drawing from others to really add to that credibility? I know you mentioned a little bit about creating the social media aspects of it to add the credibility, but what about the research behind it all?
Yeah, so a lot of the research I got from first source materials, and those are really interviews. And at this point, I've interviewed probably about 275 professionals in and around the divorce space, including lawyers, mental health practitioners, trauma specialists. I mean, just a huge range of people that really understand different aspects of what our clients are dealing with. And so it's been really, really helpful to have and also lots of parenting coaches to have them share techniques of what works. And when I interview people, I like to start with them explaining something about the topic we're talking about, but also getting into misconceptions or myths about that topic. Because one of the things that happens with our clients, and happened with me too, is we make mistakes because we think, oh, it's going to be this way. Like I thought, I'm afraid to get a divorce because I don't have $10,000 and there's no way I can afford it. And that made me stay longer. And then it ended up costing $100,000 for just 1 year, which was insane. And I didn't research. I didn't know. Nobody knows unless they hire a coach who can explain it to them usually. And that's what we do. But it's really important to know what you're getting into ahead of time. And I think that's one thing that the book really does It sort of gets into what to expect, how these cases are very different, and what types of qualities to really demand from the professionals that you work with. Again, like what are the right questions to ask, what to expect from the relationship, what are red flags, when to tell them when maybe it's not the right fit anymore, how your ex is going to behave in the process and why. And so in terms of my own personal story, Chris and I just did like a little bit at the beginning to give our background to again, a lot of people say, oh, I can totally relate. I love when we meet with women who say, Chris, your story was exactly like mine, to show that really abuse is a human issue. It's not just a gender issue. And that's something we also focus on with our clients. We have this weekly legal abuse support group, and we do the very unusual thing in the domestic violence space of we blend our male and female clients together for the support group. And it's just fascinating to see them help each other out. But back to the book, it's, I think really it's educational in terms of like, this is what to expect. A lot of lawyers, in terms of the research, lawyers that I interviewed were very happy to give advance praise and to contribute because, actually one person said she just, the book came out in 2023, a real estate professional that I interviewed and mentioned in the book just got in touch a couple of weeks ago. And she said, oh, I just got a client because they saw me you talking about what we talked about in the book. But I think a lot of the source material was from those interviews that I used transcripts to go back on and writing really careful questions about what I anticipated people would want to know.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's important to interview those people and kind of get a really well-rounded perspective of what you're writing about. And that's the only way to ensure that everything that goes in your book is not only accurate, but has multiple perspectives, you have the right guidelines, all that, the whole nine. And as a benefit, you also made those connections now. For example, other people even with those connections, getting new clients off of it. So, complete win-win. So anybody listening today, interviewing, a perfect way to get that firsthand research for your book.
Yeah.
So yeah, all of that being said, now that these books have been out on the shelves, you did mention that you've gotten a lot of feedback, that you've helped so many people. Can you share a little bit about that to us? Do you actively offer coaching, for example, or is it more so feedback from the book, or both?
No. Okay. So actually it's the coaching is the basis of what we do. So we say we are high conflict divorce strategists, and we work with men and women all over the world in a coaching capacity where we say it's not 1-to-1, it's 2-to-1. So it's Chris and I, and we always meet on something like Zoom and we basically strategize. And so that's how most people find us. And a lot of people find us from the book, from the podcast, from our social media. I like to do interviews over Instagram Live. And then so people can, I love doing it live because I love the engagement. And I love when people ask questions. I'm pretty quick on my feet. And I think it's very satisfying and validating when somebody can ask a question to an expert and get an answer immediately, especially in our community where people are so desperate and crisis driven that they really need, it's like, I need the answer right now. And so they feel like people are paying attention and care. So yeah, social media has been great. The book has been great. We also just released our first course from our program. It's called From Fear to Fierce in Family Court. And so one of the things we do more than anything with our clients is something called strategic communication, which is a method of writing to their ex. We say you're writing to your ex, but you're writing for the invisible audience of whoever might be involved with your case. And so that's the thing, the communication with their ex that gets them crazy. Like people are so frightened of messing up or saying something wrong, or what if I don't do this, I'm going to lose my kids, or my ex is going to win in court. And so training them how to communicate effectively in writing is the best way to start them healing and turning the power dynamic around. So the course is called How to Communicate with Your Ex Without Destroying Your Case or Losing Your Mind. And then we're going to do one on parenting plans. And then we're going to do the third one on the topic of our current book, which is about how to handle when your ex is turning the kids against you, both legally in the courts and personally, because there's more that you can do outside of the courts. Because unfortunately, something called parental alienation, or a type of coercive control, where once a couple separates, one parent wants the child to be loyal only to them. They try to make the child reject the other parent. And it is one of the top issues that we see in our community. It's another form of domestic violence. And it's very unfortunate, and it affects about 22 million people in just America and Canada alone. So this is a really big pain point with our community, and that's why this book I'm super excited about. It should be coming out in November. And the idea for it came as we were in 2023, we were at the American Library Association conference in Chicago, and I had just seen Judy Blume, who is one of my favorite authors. Yeah, and so we were driving to the airport, and I don't remember, Chris and I were sitting in the backseat. We're like, oh, we better start thinking about our next book. And that's when we came up with this idea. And so since that summer, I have been doing so many interviews with people on this topic, and just going, as we're writing the book now and the final draft is due tomorrow, I'm thrilled because I feel like there's probably at least 50 plus experts in this book.
I mean, that's really incredible. First off, that you're helping people every single day through what you do. And this new book is coming out also. Is there a certain date in mind that we can be on the lookout for? Or should we keep up to date on socials? Oh, there is
Yeah, on socials, but it's supposed to be for November. It's usually, so in a few months, that's when the publisher said. And so our publisher's based in New York City, so we're going to have a big thing there. One of our people that we interviewed is in Long Island. She's like, I got a Barnes & Noble here. And then hopefully we'll go to California. We went to California last time. We went to Chicago. So I love any excuse to travel. Yes. I will do.
That's incredible. So great. So what are the exact links that we could go to find out more about, what you do and to look for the book tour, for example? We're going to put those in the description box, but if you don't mind sharing with everybody right now too.
Yeah, super, super easy. If you just look up Been There, Got Out, you will find us. We are everywhere. Our website is beentheregotout.com. If you type in Been There, Got Out, it's like a little underscores in between an Instagram, but it's a pretty lively account, so you'll find it. We're on, TikTok, Facebook, like pretty much everything. We're everywhere. On Amazon, the book is called Been There, Got Out. The next book is also going to be called Been There, Got Out with a different subtitle. So very, very easy to find. And my email and Chris's are Lisa and Chris at beentheregotout.com. It's just the two of us. We answer everything ourselves. And that's it.
Perfect. No, I love that. So to everybody listening today, we're going to have that in the description box. Go ahead and click on over, check it out. I think this is beneficial for everybody to learn about and know. Whether or not you're in a relationship like this yourself or going through it yourself, it's important to know the details. Somebody else in your life may need to go through it. You might need to have some information and backup and guidance. So it doesn't hurt to even pop onto one of these live shows and get a little bit of knowledge. And of course, stay up to date about the new upcoming book as well. All amazing things. I'm wondering, do you have any other last bits of advice that you can offer the audience today? A two-parter here. One for, in general, divorce, but also the writing process as well.
The writing process, I'm like, just get it out, get it on paper, because you never know what you're going to use it for later. I feel like writing my whole life, it's like I have dozens of journals. I don't even know where some of them are. They're like scattered throughout the house. But I felt like it was so cathartic for me to get this out on paper. It wasn't like I was planning to write stuff, but then later when I did do the book, I had so much material that I could remember accurately because that was me at the time, and it was just really helpful. And that has also helped my business because Chris and I have what we call radical empathy. Like we really understand what it's like, and having those journals makes it easy for me to look back and be like, oh my gosh, I remember that same feeling of waking up every single day and feeling like there was this pit of pain in my stomach and never feeling like it was going away. And I can promise you now from the other side that it's going to get better, which leads into the divorce part of what I just said. If this is you, if you are going through something like this, if you haven't left yet, or if you're in the early stages, I like to say, even though it feels completely overwhelming, just know that you have more power than you will ever have. And the ability to get an education ahead of time, to learn before just jumping into the divorce industry, which is multi-million-dollar business, like it really benefits you to learn as much as you can and to get support and know that it's going to be a rough ride, but you're going to get through it, and it's going to be so much better on the other side, and it's going to be better for you. But it's not just going to be better for you, it's going to be better for your children as well.
I love both of those pieces of advice are extremely important. You always need to continue writing regardless, get it out there. You never know when you're going to draw back upon those journal entries, for example. And yeah, just having a positive mindset no matter what you're going into also is just another thing to keep in mind. It's challenging, it's hard, but you know what? You got to get through it. You got to learn to work through it your best. And again, seeking out that team of people to help you, whether it be Lisa yourself or, whoever else it might be. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. And you're going to get through it because
Yeah.
you think you've gotten through everything else. You're going to do it. You'll make it.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, it's so important. So again, everybody, regardless of if you have a situation like this on your own hands or not, check out these books, and all of Lisa's materials. Important stuff right here. Links are right in the description box. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on today. It's really been an insightful episode. I think we learned a ton, not only about you and your book, but also about the world of divorce and the writing process too. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for hosting, Danielle. It was, again, my pleasure.
Yeah, of course. I mean, really, the work you're doing is making a difference for people. People desperately need guidance during these dark times. And so for our listeners, remember that the insights we've heard today, they're not just theoretical, they're battle-tested from somebody who's walked the path herself, two people who have, actually. So if this advice resonates with you, again, click on the links, check it out. And remember that at Authors on Mission, we believe that sharing your experiences is how we all grow and improve personally, professionally. So this journey is just one of many stories we have. Check out the others here on Authors on Mission podcast. Until next time, this is Danielle Hutchinson, empowering you with the knowledge and confidence to become an expert in your own right. We just had an amazing conversation here with Lisa, and just remember, stay informed, stay inspired, and keep moving forward on your own mission. We'll see you next time, everyone.
This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.